compliance. So this webinar is hosted by CISA. We are a global leader in cybersecurity solutions for the payments ecosystem. We are trusted by leading brands, payment brands, and financial institutions across 40 plus countries. We have secured over 1,000 organizations through our forensics-driven cybersecurity powered by real-world breach intelligence. So at CISA, we unify security, compliance, privacy, and intelligence into a continuous life cycle spanning AI-powered compliance automation, advanced offensive security testing, agentic SOC capabilities, and outcome-focused cybersecurity training. My name is Venu Nambiar, and I head the brand marketing for CISA. I will be the moderator for today's session. So to set the context for today's webinar, all of you must be aware that over the past few years, data privacy has moved from being a compliance checkbox to becoming a core business responsibility. In India, this shift has been formalized with the enactment of the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, popularly known as the DPDP Act 2023, followed by the notification of the rules in November 2025. So with the implementation timelines approaching, particularly the operationalization of the Act in 2026 and the enforcement milestones leading up to November 2027, organizations are across sectors are now entering a critical phase of readiness. However, while awareness of the Act is growing, many organizations are still grappling with some fundamental questions. What exactly needs to be done? Where should we begin? How much of investment is enough to stay compliant without overextending the budgets, etc., etc. So at CISA, in many of our conversations with CISOs, compliance leaders, legal teams, and business executives, one common theme which emerges is that is there a significant uncertainty around translating regulatory expectations into practical implementable controls. And this is exactly the context in which today's session has been designed. Okay. So through this webinar, CISA aims to bring clarity and a practical perspective to the DPDP compliance journey. Okay, so we will explore some key questions that many organizations are currently facing, including like what is the current privacy posture of our organization? Are we able to clearly map those gaps to the actual risks involved in data processing activities? What are the potential business impacts? And perhaps most importantly, how should organizations prioritize their compliance investments to ensure that the allocated budgets delivers the most effective protection and regulatory alignment? So that's what we're going to cover. And to help address these questions in a practical and actionable way, today's session will go beyond theory. Okay, our experts on this show will walk through a simulation-driven approach to help you understand your organization's risks, identity gaps, and make some informed decisions about selecting and prioritizing the right controls with the available investments and budgets. Okay, so now let me just introduce you to the speakers. So I'm really happy and delighted to have with us Ramakant Mohapatra and Nikhil. Both of them are data privacy and governance experts. They will share their insights and guide us through this exercise. A quick introduction about Ramakant. Ramakant Mohapatra is the Vice President and Head of CISA's Data Protection and Governance Business Unit. Recognized as a privacy leader of India in 2023 by DSCI NASSCOM, he is a seasoned data privacy and protection leader with over 25 years of experience in IT, information security, and privacy. My colleague Nikhil is a senior consultant at CISA. He specializes in data security and privacy across the financial services and retail sectors. So both these gentlemen, they bring deep experience in helping organizations navigate complex privacy and regulatory landscapes. And today they will provide a practical lens on how to approach the DPDP readiness effectively. So whether you are from the legal, compliance, security, or leadership team, today's session is designed to give you a clear understanding of your role, your risks, and how to plan your privacy controls strategically. With that context set, let's begin the webinar. Over to you, Ramakant and Nikhil. Please take it from here.
Thank you, Venu, for setting the context for the webinar and the importance of controls, risk, and budget for data protection and compliance aligning to DPDP. So I would like to share our thoughts based on customer discussions, project research, and different forums and knowledge sharing across the board. So with the help of that, we have a small agenda that we all like to set the context before you go for the simulation exercise. So first, we have to understand the organizational moves and trends in the data privacy. With that, we should understand what are the fundamental gaps that organization fails to answer in protecting the personal data. Then the C-level data protection problems, where the C-level guys are accountable for protection of data and the penalties and bringing the liabilities to the minimum. In that context, since we are talking on DPDP today, we should understand the stakeholders, what is their accountability obligations, and how the non-compliances will be enforced with penalty and fines by the Data Protection Board of India. Then finally, we will also talk about, we have limited budget in hand, and we have penalties has to be mapped to the risk and remediated, and we should also control those kind of gaps through appropriate controls. Either it is organizational control, process controls, or technical controls. So with help of that, let me just work around to give you some insights of organizational trends and organization trends, how that it matter to us now. So in any organizations, if you look at these kind of different quadrants and domains, we should understand that it's very, very important of each one of these domains to be compliant in order to align to any data privacy regulations and in particular to DPDP. However, with a limited budget and limited type of scope and organizational bandwidth, it is not really possible to cater to all these kind of controls and also ensure that we have 100% perfection. So to share a few, if you understand that right, the third-party risk assessment or third-party risk management is one of the key area in the context of DPDP. Spanning over to that, if you can look at that, data breach and prediction, response, and regulatory reporting is a mandate where all the data has to be controlled, and if any data breach has to be reported within hours. Similarly, we should understand about that the user rights, the data principal rights, all of us in this call are data principal rights. So our rights should be also be respected, and all the protection controls for our users should be given as well. And moving on that, this particular year is going to be investment year for data privacy. Because unless you invest in your management systems, people, process, and technology, in order to protect the data, you will not be able to do the minimal requirement that's required. If you do not do, then it will be aligned to your hefty penalties and fines. Sometimes you may be get eroded as well in your business. So with that particular one, we'll set a context that all of us knows about what to do, but we never look at the fundamental gaps that we have. What does that mean is that we should understand first to identify the personal data in and around us in all our systems, either in cloud, on-prem, or any kind of system that we have. Going over from there, we should understand that what are the type of data, whether it is sensitive, non-sensitive, and what are the impact of the data if it is breached or compromised. In addition to that, we should understand that whether we have shared those data with third parties for processing, and whether third parties have adequate controls to control those protection. Very, very important here. Then moving to that, have we got all the controls to not to expose the data? That means there is a data exposure or data compromise that may happen, aligning to the security or technical controls that are in place. Do we know that the data belongs to some particular individual? And have you taken his rights and controls to give him that confidence and user trust that his data is safe with the processing entity, either data fiduciary, data processor, or significant data fiduciary? And right now, in this global world and the way the digital world is spanning across, we should never undermine the data transfers across borders. So hence, the data visibility and knowing the risk associated with data visibility, and we should understand how to protect them, and hence all the DPDP obligations can never be compromised or overlooked. So with that, let's understand what are the next level, C-level issues. Some of you in this call might belongs to a role which is accountable for the data. Either you are data owner or you are a custodian of providing services to protection of data. So in that case, you might be a CISO, you might be a DPO, you might be an InfoSec manager or CIO or CRO. So in that particular context, we should understand that unless we know the data, that means all the demographics of data, what is the type of data, where does it lie, how does it relate to a particular individual, and what is the sensitiveness, and whether it is in the dark web or it is some other place where you don't know. Maybe the data storage can extend to backups as well. So with that context, understanding the data is very important, and unified data intelligence is not something which is very, very perfect in this world. Now moving to that, as part of our ecosystem to bring down the operation cost and do an cost optimization or spanning to total cost of ownership, nowadays the processes are being outsourced. So hence the third party becomes one of the primary players. So, but that, do you know that whether they are doing right? So that is something, if the breaches happened in third party end, then we are also primary responsible. So while we put a lot of controls and also ensure that controls are adequate or not, we do not know. In order to know that, we should have something called audit grade evidence management to know that how it is adequate or sufficient or insufficient. So with that, we'll move to the topic of DPDP, right? All of us know that the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, DPDP Act 2023, and now rules 2025. Again, we have to ensure that there is an enforcement date which is November 2027, but the Data Protection Board of India get informed by November 2026. Hence, the enforcement of penalties will start from November 2027. With that context, I want to give a thought before we start with the simulation that these are the primary stakeholders in the whole DPDP Act ecosystem. The data principals, all of us here in this call and outside, so our data is being processed by someone like a bank. They are known as data fiduciary, and Government of India has moved into two categories of fiduciary processing entities, primary, which in other terms known as data controllers in across the globe. So why they have done that? Based on the type of data, volume of data, impact, sensitivity data that is being processed. That means they want to encourage small or large medium enterprises to also participate in this journey and also ensure that that is being segregated, known as risk-tiered approach for data protection. So moving to that, we discussed our data processors. It might be your Airtel, which is processing the data, or the payroll processing outsourced from another company. And similar to that, one new concept called consent management had come into play, which is known as the basis of processing, and which the data principals like us should have kind of facility features to withdraw the consent, stop processing, and only for a particular purpose. So hence everything is tied together, and we have the jury in the top, Data Protection Board of India, who is the custodian of all these principles. So hence they are also looking into this very carefully. So moving to that, all the rules and all the stakeholders have some accountability as per the law, as per the rule. So hence these are some of the kind of primary obligations which has been laid down by the Act. And if you are a significant data fiduciary, which will be notified by the Data Protection Board of India on the registration, then you should have something additional, because we want to protect the sensitive data more and more in very protected way. That is the intent. In addition to that, if you are having any algorithmic processing like AI, ML, that also needs to be looked into. So these obligations are tied together. If you do not do these obligations, there will be a non-compliance. Hence, the non-compliance will lead to the penalties, which is highest in 250 crores. However, we should understand there is a penalty on all of us as data principals, 10,000 rupees, if we provide misappropriation of data or the fraud related kind of details. So, but the penalties will be levied based on the factors and the quantum of penalty will be levied based on the impact and the nature and gravity of the situation. But however, so maximum is 250, minimum is 50 crores. So that means a huge amount of penalty for any organization not being complied to be wiped up from business. So moving to that, so that is something that I want to leave with before we proceed. So we should know that what is our current data privacy posture. All the organizations have something in large or small scale implementation of some of the security controls, some of the privacy controls, and many more. But we should know that what is our current data privacy posture through some assessment or through gap assessment. We should also understand the requirement of DPDP, map them accordingly to understand what are the inadequate controls and what is the risk levels with mapping to DPDP requirements. Then we should also understand, another point is that we should understand what are the risks that has to be prioritized, because there will be many risks and each risk will have some weightage, some impact. We should understand that, and based on that, we should have some kind of suggested controls to mitigate those risks. In some cases, we may not be able to mitigate the risk. However, we have to understand that given a budget amount, we should be able to prioritize those risks and hence put those kind of controls so that we bring down the liability, right? So when you bring down the liability, so there it will be related to risk. It will be related to risk and budget control and penalty. So why I'm telling this is that all the risks cannot be mitigated in reality. We have to prioritize the risk based on the type of budgets we have to put those appropriate controls to mitigate the risk so that the overall liability comes down, penalties is minimal, and we do not wipe out our business. So hence in reality, it doesn't happen that you will be able to meet 100% of your risk. So with that, I just want to show that how our navigator works, and my colleague and good friend Nikhil will walk you through, but just I want to leave some kind of view on that. So we have to know you belongs to which kind of role classification, either fiduciary or significant or processor. That is important to know. Then you should also declare in this journey simulation exercise, what are the different controls you already have or implemented. Very, very important to understand the gap. So while we understand the gap, then we know that what is required. So there is a mapping on the risk levels and penalty associated with that to give you the score of high penalty, high risk. So that is the model in our exercise today. Then in any organization, there is a particular aspect of the coin that will be allocated as a budget. So the budget is very important in order to understand that, because all organizations are not equipped to allocate all the budget that is required for data privacy. So it has to be staggered manner, it has to be priority based, it has to be based on the risk and impact of the business and the organization. So hence some kind of budget is allocated, and for this exercise, we have taken as a coin, as an index. So Nikhil will explain on that. So we have to understand that we have this much budget, that what are my priority risks, how will allocate so that my risk is minimized. With that, so these are some of the boxes that will be open, that we have to understand the which risk has been attributed to how many coins internally through the rules engine, and how does it manifest in terms of telling you that this is what we have. At the end, you will get also a dashboard which will talk you that how much coin you have spent, what is your risk levels. So with all this, thanks a lot for listening, and I hand over now to my friend Nikhil to run you through the simulation. You get a practical approach, how to do this and what you are supposed to do, and how to prioritize risk and take a conscious decision of minimizing your risk and liabilities. Over to you, Nikhil.
Yeah, thank you, Ramakant. Before Nikhil, you go, I just want to remind our attendees that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat window and we will take them up at the end of the webinar. Okay. Thank you. Over to you, Nikhil.
Thanks, Vin, and thanks, Ramakant, for laying down the context. So as Ramakant explained, we have developed this specific rule engine, right, to basically help organizations and their CISOs and DPOs to determine what specific role they would basically fall under, and then take a call as to what particular privacy controls that they would have to implement within the organization based on the applicability decided. So, so since the first step is determination of the role, what we would basically do is we would move into the determination section, where, as we know, as per DPDPA, that there are three types of roles that an organization might fit into. One is the data fiduciary, the other is a data processor, and finally, the significant data fiduciary itself. Now I'll move into the whole assessment aspect of it, where a series of 22 questions would be filled by any individual. Based on these questions answered, an individual would be determined, or an organization would be determined, in which specific category they fall under. Some of these questions are very generic. These include, does the organization collect personal data in form of digital or offline aspects of it? Does the organization use automated processing to process personal data? And so on. Now, based on these questions that I've answered, right, the tool will basically categorize me into a specific class of data fiduciary or a data processor altogether. Yep. So as I've completed the entire assessment journey, what happens is the tool has used its own matrices to identify under what particular classification I fall under. So one of these categories are the data fiduciary as part of the questions that I've answered. And moreover, the tool also gives you a recommendation as to view a specific scenario that you would like to overview. So in this particular case, what I would do is I can directly go into the risk and budget calculator. And what it does is it basically gives me a view of how many coins can I use as part of this particular class of data fiduciary that I've applied to. Moreover, the tool also gives me a capability to apply a specific coin based on the budget that is set. So in this case, I would go ahead and use the recommendation that is provided to me. I click on apply, and what happens is the tool by default selects certain privacy requirements that would be aligned to fulfill these privacy risks altogether. If I feel that some of these privacy risks or privacy requirements are fulfilled through my current posture itself, I can go ahead and uncheck these and select another requirement that actually fits my actual need, and then look into the aspect of whether I still have any other spendings left for my specific budget that is allocated. Moreover, towards the end, it gives me a summarization analysis as to what capabilities I've selected, how many coins I've consumed for that particular capability, and what is the recommendation and the need for it. By the end of the page itself, it gives me a scorecard as to how many privacy requirements I've selected, how many coins I've spent, what is the risk level I'll try to avoid, and what is the penalties also I'll try to avoid based on the entire assessment or budget calculation that I've done. So this basically gives you a view as to how much I would need to spend, what requirements I have to implement with my organization. And then based on this, I could take some calls on implementing those controls itself. So this concludes our entire journey of the demonstration itself. Vinu, up to you. Okay. So before I jump into the entire other aspect of it, I would just run you through some of the simulations that's there. So we have around 3 simulations that's given within the tool. One is the retail sector, the banking, and the fintech aspect of it. So I'll just click on the banking territory itself. So what it does here, it gives me a use case scenario as to what the particular bank is about. Okay, how many customers they have served. It also gives me a category as to which particular classification that particular bank belongs to, and what is the budget that is associated with me, and what is the risk level altogether. Okay, based on the certain trigger points that's been showcased here, the organization basically gets classified as an STF altogether. That being said, there are certain obligations that this bank would have to follow, which you can see on the right side. Okay. As we scroll down, what happens is the tool gives you a list of risks and penalties that would be enforced. Based on those risks and penalties that are demonstrated, it would also have some coins associated with it. Coins are nothing but your budget that you could go ahead and implement onto these controls itself. Finally, the use case also gives you a view of what recommended actions needs to be implemented based on the risk that's identified. So in this particular case, they have identified certain aspects like having a DPI or data flow mapping done, fixing the entire consent management or lawful basis of processing, strengthening the third-party governance aspect, enabling the data principal rights management, and enabling governance and continuous compliance aspect of it. So overall, this basic scenario gives you a view as to how an entity or an STF would basically have certain privacy controls implemented within these organization and how we can go ahead and remediate those. So this is just a food for thought as to what recommendations or a use case as what needs to be implemented. Now we'll just go into the data processor aspect of it, which is a use case focusing on a fintech company. So as we know, most of the fintech companies have a fintech merchant relationship, right? Where a fintech platform provides some sort of consolidated payment gateway method to these specific merchants where they can go ahead and process not only PI information, but also PCI information within the ecosystem. As this particular data processor, right, would be categorized as a third party, he's been associated with certain coins, right, that he can go ahead and utilize. Based on this, his risk level is also moderate based on the DPDP context because the rule itself does not enforce penalties onto a data processor. But what happens here is there would be stringent data processing agreements between a controller and processor that would basically enforce a processor to have some controls in place. So here are some obligations that this particular fintech would have to undergo, right? So some of them are having a DPIA done, notifying a the data fiduciary of a breach that is impacted, or also instructing what type of data processing activities that they would do before they have those activities carried out for a particular data fiduciary together. As we scroll down, you would also see some sort of risks that's there. So here are some of the risks that the organizations would face. And based on these risks, there are certain coins again associated with it. Based on these risks, the organization can go ahead and have these recommendations implemented. So as we follow down, what we see is certain remediation actions that the organization can take. One is executing a data processing agreement between all these merchants. Does this make sure that not only the third party, but also his partnership with the data fiduciary is strong? Second thing, implementing security safeguards like access control mechanism tool or a DLP solution. Having data breach monitoring activities implemented, or having a SIM tool implemented within the ecosystem to detect if there's any breach that happens. And finally, enforcing retention schedules within the entity itself. So this basically gives you a scenario as to what controls a data processor would have to implement and what are the recommendations that they would have to follow in order to stay compliant with the DPDP Act. So overall, this concludes our entire demonstration of the whole privacy navigator tool itself. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Nikhil. One second, I'm just trying to see if my video is coming back on. Yeah, there you go. So great. Thank you, both Ramakant and Nikhil. So the key takeaways, I think, from our discussion, if one has to encapsulate, is that organizations today need to prepare for the upcoming enforcement timelines and the establishment of the Data Protection Act. It is becoming increasingly important and clear that privacy compliance cannot be approached as a last-minute regulatory exercise, right? So it requires a structured, risk-based, and well-prioritized approach, right? So Ramakant, any parting shots before we get into. I see a few questions from the audience. I wanted to just ask you if there is something else that you would like to share with the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Venu. So I would like to share a few thoughts which will be very helpful for the organization in their data privacy journey while implementing the DPDP Act. So first one is that we have to understand that all the organizations are not of the same size. So one size doesn't fit all. So we should do only the appropriate controls that is required based on the risk that is there or analyzed from that organization. For example, the way the banks foresee their risk in business and impact will be completely different from the way that the telecom operator they see versus a person who is doing only e-commerce they will foresee. So one part is we have to do the risk assessment, understand our risk, and try to measure the risk in terms of the impact, then try to plan for the implementation of the adequate controls. The second aspect I would suggest is that giving and orientations and making your people understand about data privacy and creating some champions in the overall scenario makes a lot of change. So this is like a change management process in any organization. So that means it is like a transformation, a journey, an organization moving from less privacy centric or posture management to the real privacy world, which is always hanging sword like penalties. So creating the data, creating the awareness, and creating some champions in demonstrating, executing them within the organization plays a vital role. So creating awareness programs and ensuring that particular one is key. So the another point we want to highlight that it is not only the DPOs or it is also InfoSec's job to ensure that data privacy or data security is implemented. It is everyone in the organization, starting from the boardroom as to the CEO, CIO, everyone has a role to play because always the management buy-in plays a key role in mitigating the risk, which will be commensurate with the investment approach and approvals. So that is one point we should never forget on that. Finally, as we understand, in this complex world, we cannot run the business without our ecosystem of third-party processing, our outsourcing capabilities to do something that we don't really do, right? For example of a background check in an organization should not be done by themselves because there might be some kind of vested interest because the referrals may come within the organization. Hence, outsourcing the background check of any employee to another third party makes a lot of sense because that is known as third party view, where always you can challenge in the court or wherever it comes. So, but while I say so, we should understand that a lot of data will be shared by the individual or the employees, by the employer to the third party. So hence the data should be shared securely. And the second point is third party should have the ability to process the data very securely and aligning to DPDP or aligning to any law. So due diligence in terms of identifying, also ensuring that the data privacy processing is done and adequate is also second to none. It should be prioritized. Another part wanted to understand that we share a lot of data across our borders because we are MNCs who will be running business across the globe. So although we have mutual treaties or business treaties by the government or Minister of Corporate Affairs, but at the entity level, we are also responsible to protect our data that is with us, our employees, our customers, or our stakeholders that we have, including our board members and our executives. So hence, while we send any data for the legal requirements outside, we should ensure that they all are secured and transferred or shared accordingly. And if there are issues, we should always ask for the different kind of contracts or binding clauses to ensure that we protect the data of our employees and our executives before we send them. Finally, all this can happen with the help of the controls. So in the privacy world, there are two types of controls that has to be done to mitigate the risk. What are the two types of controls? All of you in this seminar, you might be very much aware of that, but I will rephrase that for everyone's understanding. One part is known as organizational controls and another part is technical controls. In organizational controls, we should ensure that all the policies, procedures, and all kind of guidelines are always aligned to the privacy requirements so that nothing goes That means I have a process, I have a procedure, I have a governance, and I have everything that can be compliant. The second part is technical controls. What does you mean by technical controls is that nothing can be protected without applying controls in the security or technical controls, starting from identity access management, authorization, authentication, network controls, firewalls, switches, and then DLP solutions, ensuring that data leak doesn't happen. And the fourth one is that answering that now in the cloud world, we all are moving to cloud. So many organizations are moving to the cloud because of the cost optimizations. They are putting their sensitive data on-prem, and they're moving some of the non-sensitive data like DevOps to the cloud. So we should ensure that the data that is segregated has also CASB, Cloud Security Access Broker, so that what happens there, that is also protected. And while we'll say so, documentation, hard copies are never also compromised. We should ensure that according to DPDP, all has to be digitized. But however, before going to digitization, while collection, we should be careful that we're collecting and digitizing immediately. So the hard copy has to also be securely purged according to purging mechanism. So if you look at the overall what I told in last 2 minutes, it tells that you cannot leave the data protection to only single individual who is accountable. Maybe his accountability at C level to chop his neck when there is a breach or there is a penalty. Second one, it will not be done by individual. It is a teamwork and it is a team enhancement. Third one, we have to have a culture. We have to have a culture. Like we drink water every day, we should have a privacy culture in the organization. Fourth one, never give up to your surrounding, the ecosystem, your customers, your third-party processors, your society, and so many, right? We should not never. Fourth one, all controls are not 100% sufficient, because as we traverse in the digital world, the risk vectors increases and exponentially. So we have to catch up with the risk vector to mitigate the risk. In the process, there might be some things which you might miss because organizations and the organizational infrastructure may not be equipped by the time you take so. So we should try to always minimize, bring down the liabilities, doing enough in order to analyze the risk, understand the risk, prioritize them, and do that. So if you do all this, finally, so we can have a safer and trusted organizations, but doesn't mean reality in the real sense that you will be 100% breach-free, because that no one can guarantee. As we understand, no developer can claim that he has a defect-free code they're being delivered. Similarly, all the controls doesn't 100% commensurate with the controls. So why I say this particular one, I want to leave with a thought, because none of the regulations, they specify how much to control. So what are the controls to be put? Always they say that you should have adequate, appropriate, and sufficient control to protect the personal data based on the processing and based on the type of risk that we foresee. So always the regulation goes by the risk based. For example, a organization processing children data is more sensitive than a guy who is just processing some courier services, right? So if you look at this analogy, so that's why data sensitivity, data classification, data protection is something has to be done. And in order to that, you have to identify the data and ensure that classify and protect them as it is required. So hope, Venu, I could answer your.
Well said, Ramakant. Thank you for that. So in a nutshell, what we are learning is that the journey towards DPDP readiness begins with understanding our current privacy posture, identifying the gaps in how personal data is processed, and linking those gaps to real business risks and impacts. Yeah, and for those organizations, and this is going to help organizations rather make informed decisions about which controls to implement, how to prioritize them, and how to align them with the available budgets, right? So thanks for that, Ramakant. In fact, I just wanted to call out the simulation approach that Nikhil walked us through today. It basically means that compliance does not have to be overwhelming, right? It's much more simple with the right visibility into risks and a more structured framework for decision making. So that will help organization move from uncertainty to clarity and confident action. That's what I would summarize Nikhil's simulation demo. So I think we're up on a time here, but thank you all for attending today's webinar. In case you need more information and clarity on this topic, please feel free to reach out to us at info@cisa.ai. Yeah, that's pretty much it from our side till we meet you for the next webinar. Thank you all. We end the webinar here.
Thank you, everyone.